Let's tell the people a little bit about yourself. Like, so what do you do? What is your profession?
Okay. Again, as you said, I'm the director of the Center for Black Health. Now, there is another group called the Center for Black Health. I am the executive director of the Center for Black Health and Equity. And so that and equity piece is very important to add on there
Yeah.
because what I do, what our team does, we just promote health equity and we promote it for Black people
Mm.
and people of African descent. And so we've been doing that now for about the last 20 years. But for most of those 20 years, we were doing it as the National African American Tobacco Prevention Network. And
Right.
so we really had a focus on tobacco for most of our beginning. But recently, probably about the last 5 years or so, we've been doing we see that there's so much connection between tobacco and other health disparities that we might have that we might be burdened with in our population. Cancer, for example, HIV is another example.
Mhm.
Food insecurity issues, and even COVID
Yes.
19. And
Yeah.
so we changed our name, and it was last year in 2020 to the Center for Black Health and Equity to really represent all of these different health issues that are impacting African American populations.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for giving us that clarity in the history of the Center for Black
Mhm.
Health and Equity and its beginnings as the National African American Tobacco Prevention Network.
That's correct. That's it. Sure,
You
you
know,
got it.
there's a lot of acronyms in public health, so I have a little bit of practice. Um, so you talked a little bit about what areas of health you cover. Like you did talk about like you used to focus primarily on tobacco, but now since you're doing health equity, that's expanded and gotten a little bit broader, right? So what are you finding yourself focusing more on these days?
Well, let me be clear now. Tobacco is still an issue that targets and that impacts African Americans, and so
Right.
we still have a big focus on tobacco and the tobacco policy work in particular. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the banning of mentholated tobacco products. That is a huge part of what we do. We were in that fight since 2009 when the FDA excluded menthol from the Tobacco Control Act. Well, we were raising a stink back then, and we've been raising a stink now. And so we
Yeah.
were part of the efforts, as you probably saw recently. And I say
Mm-hmm.
recently, this was back in April, and that's kind of recent to us in terms of fighting for this fight for so long. That's really recent that the FDA has decided, as a result of a lawsuit filed by one of our partners, the African
Mm-hmm.
American Control Leadership Council, they
Mm-hmm.
have decided to ban menthol. Now, they made that announcement on April 29th, and we call that day, we got some shirts. I should have wore one. It says April 2019, April 20, because that's a special day. It's, they decided on that day that they're going to ban mentholated tobacco products. And so we were excited about that. We were part of that fight. We've been part of that fight, like I said, since 2009. And so that's huge. Now, one of the reasons why they decided to do that is because of all the work that's been done since about 2013, when we had the very first policy to ban the sale of mentholated tobacco products around the buffer zone in Chicago. Well, since then, there's been hundreds of policies passed in different localities and a couple of states even since that time. And so we were very excited about that local level work because the FDA wasn't doing their job. We worked with government agencies locally to ban the sale of mentholated tobacco products. Well, the FDA saw all of that happening. Plus, they saw, of course, the lawsuit that they had to respond to, and they
Mm-hmm.
decided to go ahead and ban menthol. But the work's not over. We're
Right.
still working. We're still working with other municipalities to ban the sale of mentholated tobacco products until that ruling that they said, and it wasn't even a ruling yet, but until that announcement that they made becomes a rule of law, we're going to continue to do that work in menthol.
Right. Right.
Now, some of the other work, some of the
Mm-hmm.
other work, that big work at least, COVID 19, COVID 19 misinformation. We got a lot of folks that still, believe it or not, that haven't taken the vaccine yet.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't taken that vaccine to do their part. To make sure that American lives and lives across the globe are safe and safe from COVID. They haven't done their part, and so a lot of a big reason why they haven't done their part is the misinformation and the disinformation that's out there. And so a big part of work that we're doing is putting out messages, working with coalitions across the country to not, we're not trying to counter all the disinformation, because what happens is when you try and counter disinformation or misinformation, you wind up spreading the misinformation. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to spread misinformation in our attempts to counter misinformation. But what we are doing is we're saying, hey, people, use your own sense, common sense, check it out for yourself, look at the facts, and then you make your own decision. Does this sound credible or does this not sound credible? So we're trying to get people to use those skills as opposed to trying to counter all this misinformation. But we like what we're doing. We think that that's a good approach.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach, because sometimes do you, like, in your work and as you're telling people to look at the facts for yourself, read everything, are you finding that people may not be, misinformed or disinformed in some spaces, but it really is like, I'm not ready yet. There's some things that I'm not sure of, and I want to take my time before I make a step like this. Like, are you finding that?
And that's perfectly fine. That's common sense. That's common sense to say, I'm going to look at this and study this before I jump into it. We want you to do something like that. We don't want you to be swayed by misinformation and disinformation, but we do want you to take that common sense approach.
Right. Because part of what even the reason for this channel and some of the other work that I do with the podcast is like, when we have the information, then we can make informed decisions. Like, you can't make an informed decision if you don't have it. But the key part to that is you can have all the information you want, but if you don't comprehend what you have, then you really don't have anything at all. So it's really important that people kind of take a pause and look and read into themselves. And so some of that is really important. Like, the work that you do with policy, I think, like, educating the, John and Jane public, or Jane and John Q, it's really beneficial, for people to know what's going on. And it's not enough to just show up and throw up and give them all this information, but walk away knowing that they understand what was said, and that they comprehend, because then they can go home and sit with it and then make it, and, have some autonomy over the decisions that they make the next steps.
Which is very important, because these are decisions that could impact your life or impact the life of someone else that you love. And so, the time that you take investigating, doing that lateral reading, not just up and down reading, but reading this article and reading the article next to it and the article next, that's that lateral reading. That's very important for us to be able to do in order to make those informed decisions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, a question I usually ask some of my guests, because depending on what field you're in public health, because it ranges the gamut of a whole lot of things that you could do, is what sites that you've kind of been at. But you've done a lot of work, your background is coming from community work. So the same, I think, question applies for you as well. What kind of job sites have you been to, in your career, leading up to this point as executive director?
I had a unique career to get to this point. By training, I'm not a public health professional. By training, I'm a computer scientist, and so I have a degree in computer science, and I'm a programmer, and so I could program in Fortran and COBOL++. I worked at IBM for years, but it was. Wow. Yeah. While I was at IBM, there was a program they had to where you could go out and you can mentor young boys in STEM. And so I was going to a community center, mentoring 9-year-olds in math and science. And when I was doing that, I found a lot of joy in that. And so that was exciting to me, seeing their faces when they learn, how to solve math problems and do math equations. And I thought, I said to myself, wait, I want to do more of this. And so I did a career switch, and I went to get a degree in education, secondary education, and to teach. And while I was doing that, while I was teaching in the public school system, I realized that wasn't the place for me to be, because there were all these restrictions that were there. I wanted to teach history. I wanted to teach Black history and the scientists and Imhotep, and I wanted to do that, and they didn't want me to do that. and they wanted me to stick to their curriculum. And so I
Yeah.
started doing it. Yeah. So I started doing it at community centers. And
Mhm.
for public health departments, I was teaching young boys. I ran this rites of passage program. We called it Brothers to Brother. It was for young boys 9 to 14, where I got to teach them, the way I wanted to teach them, give them their history, give them their culture, and then give them the STEM, math, and science. And then from that group, I also created another program called My Brother's Keeper. Now, this was way before Obama had My Brother's Keeper. We had My Brother's Keeper kids back in the 1990s, and these were 14 to 19. And
Uh-huh.
with these young men, what we did was after they got out of school, we had a place for them. I worked with a church, and they had a family life center, and they got to come to that family life center, and they could stay there from like after school until 8 or 9 o'clock at night if they had nothing to do at home. But we had activities for them to do. And so we were developing male responsibilities kids and
Yeah.
teaching them about the history and culture and teaching them math and science and getting their homework done and taking them on. One of the things that we did was we would take them on field trips.
Uh-huh.
First, we were just taking them to the beach, but then we said we need to go beyond the beach, and we took them to Africa. And so we took these young men that were in our program to Ghana, West Africa. They
What?
graduated
This
there.
is amazing.
They stayed there for a couple of weeks, learning the culture, learning the people, and socializing. They absolutely, loved it. We could take the whole program. I think we selected like 10
Yeah.
of them. We took 10 of them. We raised money. We asked folks for donations. They gave us money. And I knew Africa was a place for them to go because I had gone there several times myself. I'd been to Ghana a couple of times, and then I said these guys need to come to Ghana, and we took them to Africa. And so after we had done that, after we come back, is when the state of North Carolina, I remember they called and said, well, wait a minute, you're doing all these things with young men. We'd like to do a retreat with our young people. Could you help us to plan our retreat? And I did, and I started learning all this stuff at the retreat about tobacco, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know that the industry was targeting our young men like
Yeah.
this, and I didn't know that was happening, and that's how I got into the tobacco space. I was like, this is interesting, so I started, teaching our young men in our program about tobacco and how to advocate against tobacco, and they started doing that level of work, and they asked me to be the chair of the Project Assist Coalition. It was back when they had Project Assist days, and I was
Yeah.
their
That's
coalition, and
yeah.
and it's been, that's what's got me into tobacco. So I left the county level because I figured I could do more as the chair of the coalition, changing policy, helping to
Mm.
change policy. Than I was making an impact on individual young men,
Of
but I
course.
wanted a broader impact by changing policy. And I started as the chair, and then they hired me to run their whole youth empowerment program in the state of North Carolina. And from there, I left and became the tobacco program manager in the state of Georgia, and then Louisiana, and then back to Atlanta. I came, and because of Hurricane Katrina, and
Yeah.
I got rehired from the state of North Carolina. They wanted me back, and it was when I was in North Carolina that I was offered this position as the executive director. So, like I said, it wasn't the normal route or the normal road. It was completely different, but it's where I was supposed to be because
Yeah.
because when I came to the center, I think we had it was myself only, and I had our finance director who also worked at the state of North Carolina, and I had
Mhm.
Shante Keefe, and it was just us three, and now we're at 23 people, so we've
Yeah.
gone from 3 to 23. So there's been tremendous growth
Hmm.
and a demand for the work that we're doing.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm like, what a pathway. Like that was actually the next question. Like, what was your career path? That is so amazing. What part of West Africa, Ghana, did you go to?
We were in Accra, Kumasi, and of course Elmina. We had to take them to the slave castles, and so
Yeah.
we
Was on Cape Coast.
we went to Elmina, yeah, Cape Coast. And it was interesting there because we had a hotel that we stayed at, and so we were right there on. We could see the beach, we could see the castle from our hotel, and where the slaves actually boarded the ships, and so that was just a truly spiritual experience. As we
Yeah.
we got them up, I think we got them up around 10 o'clock at night. It was dark, and we were only had flashlights, and we're standing on the beach and we're looking at, and we're just silent. They couldn't say anything. They just started crying, because it was just an emotional experience, just being there. So yeah,
That is amazing. I'm gonna take a pause really quick and just acknowledge the chat. Greetings, Kashia. Greetings, top tier speakers. Greetings, Sovereign Eats. I think everybody's enjoying the story, especially when you mentioned West Africa. I'm like, that is amazing because you don't. I always hear that, like on this show, like my whole goal is to diversify. So I'm always excited when I have like male men on the show because we have a lot of women. Like public health tends to be dominated by the women. So I'm always like looking to make sure that I get a good mix of people. And so it's always really nice and refreshing to hear that someone has run a rites of passage program because we don't always have that in melanin dominant communities, and they're much needed for both young boys and girls. And so whenever I hear someone that has done that, I'm like, kudos to you. And so, like, I guess, like, there should be, like, a collective thank you, for putting in the work. Because not everybody's cut out to do it, So one question that I had for you, like, kind of moving back to the Center for Black Health and Equity, tell us about a day in the life of. So what is it like for you to do? Because so far, your story is, like, perfect for, that person who maybe they're not an MPH student, maybe they're not an MPH grad, but public health has kind of burst on the scene with the pandemic, and so maybe they're just interested in what it is. That was like a perfect story of like how you segued from computer programming to where you are now. So like, tell us about a day in the life of, because that could also be helpful for someone who's kind of thinking about a career change.
Yeah, a day in the life of, and it's a lot of it, of course, right now. It's on the phone. Before, COVID, it was a lot of relationships. So there's travel, there's travel that's involved because you've got these relationships. I've got community relationships. And so I have to make sure that I have a solid relationship with community organizations and community-based organizations, because those community-based organizations, that's why we're doing this work. We're trying to build and develop their infrastructure and build their capacity so that they can go out and advocate for whatever they want to advocate, whether it's tobacco policy or food insecurity policy, whatever it is. They just got to have the skills, first of all, how to do it, but then they've got to have the resources to do it. And they've got to know that they've got a trusted partner in us that will have their back regardless. And so that's the relationship that I have with the community organizations. I have to also get on the phone and or travel and build relationships with government agencies and government funders. Because if we're talking about developing resources, some of those resources are going to come from those government agencies and those government organizations. Each state get millions of dollars to put out. And so we have to let them know, hey, wait a minute, there's a community-based organization right here that could use some of those resources, and we're going to be there to support them in whatever it is that they're doing. So you don't have to worry about the fact that, they may not know what they do, or even in some kinds, they might not be a good fiscal agent. Well, we'll serve as the fiscal sponsor. And so we let the state governments know that. And so we're on the phone and we're making relationships and having coffee and having lunch with the state government folks. But then there's also foundations and corporations. And so you have to let them know that, again, we're trying to develop infrastructure. Infrastructure needs resources. So we need money. And so can you help to either give us money that we're going to give them, or give them money directly? And again, we'll serve as the fiscal sponsor, or we'll help them to write the grant and put out the application, whatever it takes, so that we can get these resources that are tied up in these foundations or in these corporations. They're like, oh, we don't know. We want to do something, but we don't know what to do. Well, it starts by opening up your checkbook. That's the first thing you can do. Grab your checkbook, open it up, let's put some resources out there in these communities so that they can go and solve their own problems. You don't have to solve their problem. They know how to solve their problems. What they don't have is the resources to solve those problems. And so I'm on the phone. I'm on the phone, and that's what I'm doing, because I've hired some great people that can handle the programming work. I don't have to worry about the programs and me doing this, because we've got teams of folks that are skilled, They can take the programs, any grant we get, they've got it, they're executing it, they're doing the deliverables, they're on a scope, they're managing the budgets. And so they're doing that. And so I'm trying to find additional resources for communities is what I'm doing. That's my day and that's my life every day.
Yeah, that is awesome. I did not realize that the center served as a fiscal agent. So this is a good segue. I have a question for you. So within that, is it just serving as a fiscal agent, or do you also provide to like smaller community-based organization, like capacity building, so that, you kind of like wean them off of needing a fiscal agent where they have the capacity to apply and sustain a large grant on their own?
Absolutely. That's part of the grant services. That's when we're trying to show them how to write grants, how to become a nonprofit, how to file their 501c status. We try and teach them and help them with all of that if they don't have that skill already. And so a lot of organizations that we find, they've already gotten their 501c3, but the foundations are telling them, well, you don't have any experience, you don't have any grants, you haven't received any. And so we can't give you this money. Do you have somebody that can help? And that's where we also come in. We say, well, wait a minute, we'll go ahead and receive the money for you. And now as you start getting money, now you can do it yourself because, we help you with your grant writing skills. We're going to show you how to write a winning application. We're going to help you write the winning application, and we're going to vouch for you. That's the other thing we're going to do. We're going to put in that good word to say, this group here can do the work. And if they, foundation here and know, because we've got a good relationship with foundations, and so they trust us. And so we'll say they can do the work. If you give them the money, you won't be disappointed.
Right. And so what is some of that work that some of these smaller organizations are doing? Is it tobacco mainly? And now that you've kind of spread your wings, like, is it now like a mixture of, tobacco, with maybe tobacco being the lion's share, and then maybe some groups are doing food insecurity, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm going to share a story. I got to talk about.
We like stories.
I like stories. Yeah, there's
like
this group. It's called the Heart Coalition, and they're right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And this group here, I've known them for years because in Atlanta, they were responsible, African-American group, and they've got young people working there, and they were responsible for going out and getting the parks and the recs in the city of Atlanta to go smoke free. Now, they did this with just a little bit of training and capacity building, Well, what happened is, we were working with a foundation, and they were looking for some folks that could do some work in the Atlanta area. And so I said, well, the Heart Coalition, they did this already. And so the foundation said, well, let's give them some money. And they're leading right now a smoke-free, a banned menthol camp. They're trying to get menthol banned in the city of Atlanta. So they developed the coalition, and they're doing all that work. So I went to them and I said, you know what? We've got some work that we're trying to do in food retail, food insecurity. We're trying to get some healthy retail locations.
Yeah.
We've never done this before, but I'll tell you right now, the strategy that you're using in terms of building your coalition is the same strategy. You build capacity, you learn what the issues are, and then you already know how to advocate. First, they said, I don't know if we can do this, but they said, well, yeah, we'll take that funding. So now they're doing food insecurity work. We had another grant, we had a grant for COVID-19 misinformation. We said, you think that you guys would be perfect for this. Would you like a grant for that? They said, yeah, we can do that. We can do anything.
Do it.
So now they're getting funding, started out, with nothing, but now they're getting funding to do a campaign, a menthol campaign in Atlanta. They're getting funding to do healthy retail and healthy food work, and they're getting funding to do COVID-19 misinformation. And so that's just, and it is just, now they're, they could do it, like they said, they could do anything because they got the confidence, they've got that grant, and they're not just doing tobacco. They started out just doing tobacco, but now, like us, they've expanded.
Yeah, they got that booster that they needed, and now they're able to even diversify. That's amazing work. Great work. Give us a pro and a con. Not a con. Something you wish you could change about what you do, like a pro, and then something you wish you could change.
Okay, well, I think pro is the folks I work for. Like I said earlier, I've got an amazing group of people that I work with.
I like how you said that the first time. You like that I work for.
that I work with. Yeah, because they tell me what to do, off the
Right.
top. I'm just there to kind
Yeah.
of coordinate things, but I say, well, what do you think? What do we need to do here? What do you need to do there? And
Yeah. That's
they're
what
gonna
happens
give
when
us
you have a
exactly.
team. You end up
That,
working for them because they're the
that's
boots on the
correct.
ground.
That's correct. So I work with an amazing group of people. I mean, and one of the things that we like to do here is to have folks just, advance from within. And so there's
Hmm.
this one lady right now, another story real quick. Of course, she started out as an intern from an HBCU.
Okay.
We like our interns to come from HBCUs, by the way. And so an intern from an HBCU in Central, and she worked with us for a whole year as an intern because she just wanted that experience. She was in public health and she wanted that experience. Well, after she graduated, she came on board as an administrative assistant. We had a position for her once she graduated, and she came on board as an administrative assistant, and she worked there about a year as our administrative assistant, and now she's a program coordinator. And so she already told me she's got her sights set on my position, and so I can't say anything because she's
She's
moving.
supposed to.
Yeah, she's supposed to. So I love the fact that we are working with amazing people, and we give them opportunities to advance from within. So those are a couple of the amazing things. I think a con is something that we would change. There is some we would have changed our name a lot earlier. We had thought about changing our name back in 2016, and
Hmm.
so we just changed it last year. But we had
Yeah.
thought about it back in 2016, but we waited. We didn't jump on that opportunity. And I keep saying to myself, wow, if we had taken that leap back then, like we took, when we took it, I could just imagine where we'd be right
Yeah.
now if we had taken that leap at that point in time. But
Yeah.
we didn't take it then. So
Yeah. It's interesting what a name can do, right? Because the first name, when people hear it and see it on paper, it's like, oh, they're here, and then you get put into this box. But now, like, your name is so much more encompassing. So when I see NatPen, it's like, in my mind, it was like, this is the specific thing that they do. But now when we have the Center for Black Health and Equity, it's like, oh, you guys do a whole lot of stuff.
mm,
And it also sounds like very national.
very,
So there's a lot that a name is very important.
very
Um, uh,
important. And it's so funny because I mean, not even a month after we changed our name, a funder
mhm.
came up and says, as the center, can you do this for us? And we were like, absolutely. But as the center, they didn't say as Napton. We're still Napton. We were still Napton. But they said, as the center, can you do this work for us? And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. It just puts you on a whole different map and a whole different playing field, I should
Hmm.
say.
So
Yeah,
yeah, don't limit yourself by your name would be the
yeah.
lesson that we learned from. Mhm.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Also, the young lady that started out as your intern, I'd love to have her on the show since she's interested in public health. So we can connect where you can email me her information. We can do
Sure.
like an email
Yes. Yeah.
introduction, and I'll have her on because I like to have brown people on the show. I like all kinds of people on the show, but I love to showcase melanin dominant people doing their thing in public health.
Yeah. I like that.
My platform.
It's your platform. Do how you want. There you
um, I want to just say, oh, thank you very much, top tier speakers and Sister Kashia. I'm glad you're enjoying the content. Yes, so true about the name. Like, we literally just had this strong end this weekend. I observed the Sabbath, so we had Sabbath services, like, virtually, of course, and the content was about names. And so, like, the name gives you a charge. So, naming something or someone is really, really important. So I'm glad you actually brought that up. This is so, like, um appropriate. So my last question for you is, what advice do you have for someone who's aspiring to do what you do?
go. You got to stick with it. I mean, because again, relationships can be hard. Developing relationships because people, are in different moods at different times for different
Yeah.
reasons. And you
Yep.
never know what mood they're going to be
What's
in when you
happening?
call them, and you don't know what's happening in their life on their side. And so
Yeah.
you've got to be patient with that. you've got to understand that, every time you call, a person's not going to be in a cheery and good mood to talk to you because they can
Mm-hmm.
have something else going on in their mind. Well, if that's the case, that doesn't mean no. That doesn't mean you're denied. That just means that now might not be the best time to talk.
Right.
And you
Right.
can wait and take your time and wait. There will be a better time to talk. And so just
Mm-hmm.
remember that in terms of those relationships. I mean, and so that's true, of course, as we're trying to develop our business relationships or even family relationships and employee work relationships. And so everybody is not always in that same jovial, good mood that you're in. Oh, by
Yeah.
the way, you're not going to always be in a jovial and good mood. And so that doesn't mean that the work ain't going to get done and that the
Yeah.
work it should stop. It just means that right now, you pace yourself, you understand where you are, you give yourself that
Mhm.
time to breathe, you give
Yeah.
that person that time to breathe. And then
Breathe.
once you're all taking your collective breaths, then you continue on with what it is that you're trying to
Yeah.
do, develop and
Yeah.
nurture those relationships.
Yeah. Like a temporary redirect.
Temporary, temporary,
Temporary.
not permanent, just
I
temporary.
have
Temporary.
been that person on both ends of the phone. Like, what? You know?
Not
And
now,
so,
not now. Yeah, not
not,
now.
not a good time now. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow. Bye. I
There
have
you
been,
go.
and it doesn't stop as long as you are in that position. Especially if you are trying to have like an entrepreneurial spirit, that will happen frequently, and you just kind of have to develop thick skin. So I think that's excellent
Mhm.
advice, for people who are looking to do that. I don't see any questions from the chat, but I do appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing about the rites of passage and taking the young men to Ghana. That was amazing. Do you still do some of that work?
Well, now when I go to Ghana, I take my kids. Me and my kids, we'll go over there. But I do still stay in contact with those same young men that we took to Africa. They
Uh,
still text me and email me and let me know what's going on. And they now have families and kids, and so it's just, it's
that's
encouraging when
okay.
they send me these pictures of their kids, and I just, that's pretty
That's
powerful for me.
amazing. When was the last time you were on the continent?
On the about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, on the
Okay.
continent,
And
and I'm
then do
making
you?
a plan for a trip next year. So,
Oh, awesome. Do you is it just vacation when you go, or are you doing like any kind of like work or community work with the people there?
um, there's some things that I can't share just yet, but on the next episode, we will be ready to share some things of what's going on over in Ghana and other
That is
places. So,
awesome.
yeah,
And
just stay tuned.
with that being said, we'll connect offline because I'm
Okay.
also involved in things that are going on in Ghana. So I
Okay.
totally respect that. We'll connect offline. That's
Okay.
y'all can't get the secret talk.
Y'all can get that secret talk. Secret talk.
Okay. Give thanks so much, Delmonte, for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time and also sharing about your experience and your journey. It was very enlightening, and I think it was very helpful and educational for anybody watching. And for those of you who join us afterwards, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe, and put some comments. You can engage in the chat if you have any questions for Mr. Jefferson, and I will make sure that I pass that along so that you can get that answer. And his information on LinkedIn will be in the description box. So until further ado, give thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Peace.